You know that feeling when you snag a $20 AI board off some sketchy marketplace, only to discover weeks later that it can't actually run the model you need, and you end up scrambling for a replacement? I've been there, and that hesitation is why I spent the last couple of weeks actually wiring up a few prototype rigs with the Seat Studio reComputer Mini J4012 with extension before hitting record. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. My goal here is to help you decide whether this hands-eyes Edge AI device feels like a smarter buy than the cheap knockoffs that end up gathering dust. First off, let's talk about the category itself. Edge AI boards sit at the intersection of single-board computers and neural network accelerators. They're meant to take a trained model, say a person detection network or a tiny speech recognizer, and run it locally, without sending data to the cloud. That promise is huge for anyone who cares about latency, privacy, or operating in bandwidth-constrained environments. The reComputer Mini positions itself as a production-ready piece of that puzzle, with a focus on being small enough to slip into a handheld case yet powerful enough to handle real-time inference. I started by looking at the core claims: a hands-eyes form factor, brilliant AI performance, and an expandable I/O suite. Those aren't just marketing buzzwords. They map directly onto 3 practical questions you'll ask before you buy. First, does the size let me embed this where I need it? Second, can it actually crunch the model I'm planning to deploy? Third, will it talk to the sensors, cameras, or actuators I already have? The size check was immediate. The board measures just a few inches across, and the optional extension board adds a row of pins without making the whole thing any bulkier. I was able to mount the Mini inside a 3D printed enclosure for a prototype autonomous drone, and the total weight stayed under 30 grams. That's the kind of footprint you need when you're trying to keep the payload light enough to stay aloft for more than a few minutes. Performance-wise, the J4012 module packs an Intel NPU that, according to the datasheet, can deliver several teraoperations per second for quantized models. In my tests, a MobileNet V2 model for object detection ran at roughly 30 frames per second on a 720p camera feed, which is plenty for a smart camera project that flags people at a door. When I swapped the model for a lightweight speech-to-text network, latency dropped to under 50 milliseconds, making it usable for simple voice commands on a small robot. Those numbers line up with the brilliant AI performance promise, and they matter because they translate directly into smoother user experiences. Now, expandability is where the reComputer Mini starts to differentiate itself from the budget boards you might be tempted to buy. The extension board adds a full set of GPIO, UART, IC, and even a couple of PCIe lanes if you need to attach a USB-C capture card or an additional sensor hub. I hooked a USB-C LUDAR module to the PCIe lane for a SLAM demo, and the data pipeline stayed steady without any hiccups. The board also supports M.2 storage, which means you can drop in a 256GB SSD if your application needs more local memory than a microSD card can provide. That flexibility isn't without its trade-offs. The first thing I noticed was power. The Mini draws around 5W at idle and spikes to 12W under full AI load. If you plan to power it from a battery, you'll need a fairly robust pack and a good power management strategy. In the drone test, the battery life was cut in half compared to a board without an NPU, which is something you have to factor in if flight time is critical. The board also runs a Linux-based OS, so you're dealing with a full software stack rather than a bare metal microcontroller. That's great for developers who want the flexibility of Python libraries, but it adds a learning curve if you're coming from the Arduino world. Who should consider buying the reComputer Mini? If you're an engineer or a startup building a product that needs on-device inference, think smart cameras, edge robotics, industrial quality control stations, or even portable health monitoring devices, this board gives you a ready-made platform that won't force you to redesign the hardware when you move from prototype to a small production run. The flexible customization angle shines here because the extension board lets you keep the same core while adding whatever peripherals your final design demands. Also, if you already use Seat Studio's ecosystem like their Grove sensors or their development kits, the pin compatibility saves you time. On the flip side, if you're a hobbyist whose main goal is to learn Python or to dabble with LEDs and simple sensors, you'll likely find the reComputer Mini overkill. The price point sits well above a Raspberry Pi 4 or an ESP32, And the power requirements mean you'll need a decent power supply or battery. For projects that don't need real-time AI like a weather station or a basic media server, the extra horsepower is just sitting idle, and you'll be better off with a cheaper, lower power board.